Philippines. We've heard from Tolstoy that Maggie's fantastic reading of that moment where Kitty Cherbatov realizes that she's not the one for Vronsky. But Tolstoy also wonderfully and eccentrically, in an almost kind of unhinged sense of vocation, felt that his work had to make some imprint on the moral life of his Russia. There are some great stories told by my old mentor and kind of good intellectual uncle Isaiah Berlin about Tolstoy. My favorite is actually Tolstoy used to advertise himself as being available to any students at all who wanted to put some profound moral question to him. So it is said that two young men marched all the way from some obscure mud hole in the Urals without 2 kopecks to rub together and approached nervously the front door of Yasnaya Polyana, Tolstoy's home, and said, would the master, Lev Nikolaevich, we have actually a profound moral question to put to him. And so the servant says, oh, we'll see. He goes to see Tolstoy, and Tolstoy is rocking in his chair, the pipe, the kind of mad beard of Isaiah effect there, and says, Master, there are 2 young men with barely 2 kopecks to rub together, marched all the way from mud hole in the Urals. They have a moral question to put to you. And Tolstoy said, tell them I'm not in, you know. So he goes to the front door and he says, well, young man, I'm terribly sorry. At that moment, Tolstoy appears, absolutely in his most prophetic messianic moment, says, young men, I have sinned. Tell me, what is your question? Understandably disconcerted, Grigory steps forward and says, well, Lev Nikolaevich, you preach it is wrong to resist evil with violence, but what if a tiger sprang from the jungle at you? And Tolstoy said, young men, you'll find such things very seldom happen. Good day. And closes the door. So moral teachers and moral teachers. Lewis understands, and the Lapham Quarterly carries out this magic and crucial marriage between past and future, which you just heard him be so characteristically eloquent about. Understanding really how that happens, where it doesn't happen. It will happen in high schools and other schools all over the country when there are passionate, devoted history teachers, which I honor, they're my heroes, but they have to, basically they're working from inside at the lead-lined living tomb known as social studies. Can we not abolish this horrible term, thank you. Let's start the campaign here, Lewis, right? Why should history be the discipline that dare not speak its name? The past, dead people. As I get closer to dead people, of course, it was Auden who said history is breaking bread with the dead. It's another thing Lapham's Quarterly does. Lewis understands it's constituted, its connection with our moment now in this room together. It's constituted from 3 educated instincts. The first he and I have both already spoken about. That's to say, it's civic vitality, the paradox that a discipline about the dead never really dies if you get it right and you deliver it right. Thucydides really, honor to Herodotus, but it's Thucydides really who is the first historian in the Western tradition who actually was, in some sense, a protagonist. He was a fired general in the Peloponnesian Wars, of which he wrote. And Thucydides, the whole arc of that majestic literary as well as analytical masterpiece that he delivered to posterity, is not based around the slightly contrived self-congratulation of Pericles' oration about why it is fit to die for democracy, but around a catastrophe, around the Athenian calamity of the imperially overreaching naval expedition to Sicily, to Syracuse. So from the beginning, the whole virtue, honor, and nobility of history is the nobility of the gadfly. The job of history is not to lull us to sleep with the wonderfulness of the genealogy of how we got to be who we are, of how virtuous, wise, white and male all the founding fathers are, the job of history is insomnia, is to make us troubled, is to sting us into intelligence every time we have a democratic decision to make. That was what Thucydides wanted, and we honor him by reading and writing histories that are like that. But number two that Lapham's Quarterly honors and Lewis embodies, I wish I could give him, really. I feel I should give this right back to him, actually, as a present, is the rustle of language, is language itself. History is not the political science of the past. Well, it can be. It's not entirely contemptible when it is. But it only works, ladies and gentlemen, when it's the stories you tell your children, when you take them round the 9/11 memorial, or you take them to Monticello, or you take them on the Underground Railroad route, the Freedom Heritage route in Boston, when you actually participate in the stories as much as you would with any children's literature. History is like walking through a door into the living sisterhood and brotherhood of the dead, who are still with us, whether we like it or not. And thirdly, I'm not sure this is true of Lewis, but it's certainly true of me. History feeds on greed. It's an innocent kind of greed. It's the greed and why I became a historian, I think, in the kind of shattered mess of the post-war world. I was born in 1945 in a bombed-out London with some of my mother's family who disappeared, parents of friends of mine who didn't come back. The greed is to want to spend your life in the company of more than your own contemporary generation. To listen to the voices and the company of those who come before us. In the 1870s, I like to think of Sarah Bernhardt giving Victor Hugo a hard time in the table over there. Tolstoy and Turgenev, unfortunately, invited and put on the same table, even though they hadn't spoken to each other for 17 years. Disraeli, who in his 60s, there's hope for us elderly authors, produced a bestseller, albeit slightly unreadable, called Lothair. Wonderful when he was the ultimate schmoozer in English politics. He, at one point, to Queen Victoria, who'd done a little rather tartan decorated diary of her time at Balmoral, bowed, stooped very low and said, we authors, madam, very beautifully, unctuously to Victoria. But it'd be nice to have Disraeli at a table with Bismarck without them coming to blows. The only tip I would give you, the little tidbit about Bismarck is that, you know, the scariest Prussian nationalists, there is a god, really, even a Prussian god. He had a very high voice. So that if... Isn't that good to know? So when you do your Bismarck play, if he's saying blood and iron, it'll be Blut und Eisen! It makes you feel differently about German nationalism altogether, doesn't it, actually? So we're all together in this fabulously lively necrophiliac company. And I felt this as a kid. I suppose that there's one moment in the movies when I said, I've got to be a historian. It was in a fantastically awful film purporting to be the life of Michelangelo with Edmund Purdom, who was, who was the kind of poor man's Robert Taylor. I'm really doing veteran stuff here. And he was, of course, Michelangelo. And it's made in England. And he comes riding into Elstree Studio, done up as the Piazza di Signoria in Florence, and he's very fabulous whiskers and tights, as Michelangelo must have had, and he simply jumps onto the loggia, raises the sword in the air and says, "Men of Florence, the Renaissance is here." And I thought, history's easy. It announces itself, really. Here you all are. Here is our Renaissance man, our wonderful Lewis. The Renaissance is here again, ladies and gentlemen.